on time, so I think that's wonderful. It's great to have you here. Well, half of you know me. I'm Susie Ziegler, the head of the Department of Earth, Environmental, and Geographical Sciences, and also the advisor for the Geography Honor Society that is hosting this event. And we are delighted to have two speakers, and I'm going to let John introduce kind of what the topic of the evening is and introduce our speakers. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to John.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so I'm a member of the Geography Honor Society, and I'll be graduating just here shortly. But I wanted to bring Ilan and Dave into this conversation to kind of inform the discussion around how NMU can get to be a carbon neutral campus. And yesterday we started off the series with heat pump technology and how we can electrify our heating and cooling systems to run off of power. And then now today that power can come from renewable sources. So yesterday was scope 1 emissions, and today is scope 2 when you're talking about getting to a carbon neutral campus. So power has to be included in that. That's part of a carbon footprint of a university. And so without further ado, I think maybe we can start with Dave, if you're okay with that, from Homeland Solar, and give us a primer on what on-site solar looks like and how it can be utilized.
Happy to do it. Thank you, John. My wife's from Marquette, so we have been up there on occasion, and we actually are. It's great. And one of the things that's been on my mind has been some snow. Did you happen to have the snow that we had yesterday?
We did, yep. I went surfing out in the snow a couple of days ago.
Yeah. Well, we do get up there, and I know that I think you and I got first in touch, John, because you were looking at the food co-op after it made its move to Washington Street, and that nice roof that it's got. And indeed, it's not too different from the Whitman Hall roof. I guess Whitman Hall would be considered a little bit bigger, but it could accommodate the top end of what we refer to here in Michigan as category 2, where you have about 150 kilowatts AC of interconnection and can get up toward 200 kilowatts DC. There's space on that food co-op roof, and there's space on Whitman Hall even for that. And NMU can maybe follow in the footsteps of University of Michigan, which has tried to set an aggressive target here in the next 10 years or so, and perhaps can work with that local, the Board of Light and Power, MBLP, to do category 2 installations and offset significant use. So we've had a RFP come out from the city of Ann Arbor, and with 13 city buildings on it, and you can package things like that and then put them out for bid and get contractors to give proposals that can be evaluated on a cost basis. And the return on investment can be looked at, and there's even within tax credit, tax exempt situations, find ways to get things done. So we've been as a business around 10 years, and our focus has been exclusively Michigan. So there's been some limitations because the utilities, the investor-owned utilities, have kind of a stranglehold of sorts on things down here in the lower peninsula, that we've not grown quite as big as the other. Ilan, who'll be talking, as his company's grown larger than ours, but we have done some interesting installations, commercial, that are comparable to what the NMU could do, and we'd be happy to consult or share our experience, because what we're really about is trying to get things to happen all over. And there's, a rising tide will lift all boats. And there's plenty of work out there that we're employing more. In fact, we have a fellow from Marquette who's been working with Superior Watershed coming down here to join us next month to add to our crew. So let me show you a little bit about what we've got here. If I can find that, this one here. And if I can put it in share mode. Are you able to see that?
Yep, that's great.
Some of these, these
great.
could be comparable. You've met, perhaps some of you, you have Donkers up there, and down here we have Zingerman's. And you can see Zingerman's has a mail order facility there that's got the top end category 2. When it says 180 kilowatts, that's DC. That would be an interconnection for the AC grid at about 150, or category 2 in Michigan here. Similar, there's another shot there of a nonprofit, Food Gatherers, handles distribution to food, and that's another category 2 system. You see each of these. The Huron Ophthalmology is actually a roof that John came down for a few days and had some on-the-job training and assisted us. It's near St. Joe Hospital, to just east of Ann Arbor. And the elementary school in the lower left is a similar category 2. The school system has decided to put solar on every one of its 30 schools, Ann Arbor Public Schools, and that's going to roll out over the next 4 to 5 years. There's another we've been approved to install on in the next few months, so that'll be there. A large roof there at a tennis club. You can see another 400 to 500 panels on it. Same type of thing. So let's, this is a usage that shows the solar curve and the production that comes from solar versus the actual usage there of that's the curve, the blue line, and how you do export to the grid when production is high and you're not using as much as what is produced with this by your solar.
Yeah, if I could stop you there for a question here, Dave. So
yeah,
essentially, it looks like you're overproducing during the middle of the day when the sun is highest in the sky, and then that where it goes below that flat line, the grid export, that's your overproduction. So you've got your upper solar production, but you're covering all your need, which apparently your need is highest at that time too, it looks like, and then you're going above your need though, and actually selling some back to the grid. So go on.
That's right. So you'd have to have the, your BLP in that case would value the solar for you to some extent, and you'd get those credits back for use at other times. Now that's the same kind of grid export. There would be the same kind of power that could be put into storage if storage were to be affordable enough so that you could offset use. Let's just, we have in Michigan a financing program, but if whomever is putting solar on has to decide what exactly they want to accomplish. And that's going to be and you can only do that by knowing the facility that you're going to install on, Whitman Hall or something else, and looking at the use in that facility. And we think of it as needing to have interval data, which would mean the entire year, even on an hourly consumption breakdown, so that you'd see the entire period and how it's going to use power over the entire full year. We model it with, you see how shade can influence things, and we look at this particulars of that site and the daily transit of the sun. That 180-degree transit is key to whatever facility or wherever the solar is to be designed and planned for. So we put together proposals based upon the actual use at the site, and we go over these with whomever the customer might be, put it in financing terms or else in terms of direct payment. It's common to have monitoring done on a panel specific basis, whether it's on a home or it's in a complex thing. These would show readouts panel by panel. We use a software that's this involves module-based monitoring, is typical with Solar Edge or typical with microinverters also, that convert DC power to AC right at the module. We don't tend to do that. We'd like to keep it DC until we get to the inverter. Anyway, we think that's kind of just a snapshot of how things are to be approached. But there's no lack of power coming to Marquette or coming to any sites anywhere. I was interested to be at I think it was the aquarium. Was it the aquarium or down in Chicago, one of the museums, and they just showed the sun itself and the thousands of times greater the power is. The sun hits the planet, hits all of Earth each day, then is all the power that we use. So it's a matter of will right now, and then engineering, and I suppose ingenuity to make things happen.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Dave. And we'll get back into that discussion in a little bit. I think let's let Ilan have a chance here. So I met with Ilan of Impact Power Solutions earlier this year, I guess, this school year, and eventually brought him into the fold with NMU's facilities. And so we've had discussions with them, and there was some really encouraging statistics that he shared with us at that meeting. So I think, they'll be in the conversation going forward as NMU looks to put together an energy master plan over the next 6 months. And I think Ilan will be able to explain how solar plus storage can really cost effectively be a means to address NMU's energy challenges and cost challenges and carbon footprint.
All right, so here we are. And I just saw a comment come in that was specifically about capturing energy from solar and getting that into an electric vehicle. So that's that is something that is we're able to discuss because of a couple particulars with NMU. So I pulled this together, and I really had to pull back a little bit on how much information I put in this kind of presentation, because there's just so much to go over. So I really just tried to put in some fancy looking pictures, and then to talk a little bit about what solar is doing, what the market's doing, and kind of really the momentum that's behind the industry right now, and how this helps. As Dave said, it does. All boats are lifting right now. There's so much momentum behind solar. So this is the latest graph from the Solar Energy Industry Association, and it's showing the huge increase in installations throughout the US for solar, but also where they come from. So you can see a lot of utility solars in there, which is not a surprise. Utilities, their entire business plan is to have energy be produced and then sell it to you. But you also see then residential is a big growing segment, as well as non-residential, which would count as, it could be government, it could be commercial, industrial, kind of all of the above. But it's growing significantly. And with the current infrastructure plan that's being proposed, there's additional incentives and tax credits that will help the industry continue to grow as I think we need to. There's a lot of reason why sustainability, and solar is a big part of that, but a lot of reason why that needs to be how we produce energy in this country and on this planet. So I included this is a website called RE100, and it tracks the largest companies in the world that are making commitments to, at the worst, 100% carbon free by 2050. But many of these are actually going better than that. I included a couple in this first page. It's possible that I included 2 beer manufacturers, but I also included PepsiCo, which is a good example. Pepsi is requiring all of their upstream and downstream suppliers to also have sustainability plans in place so that they'll continue purchasing from them. And that's a big incentive for these companies to make decisions to move in this direction. So we're seeing a lot in the past few years here, a lot of private companies really helping to build this momentum, and all of this helps the entire industry grow, and it helps governments make decisions as well. And then this next page just shows a few of the many hundreds of global companies that have made this commitment to carbon neutral by 2050. So I'll let that sit just for a couple seconds, but I'm guessing if not all of these, most of these logos are pretty familiar to all of us. And specifically regarding energy storage, we're really at the precipice of this becoming a major piece of the energy grid as a whole. At Impact, we do some energy storage, but we're really focused in the Midwest on where we do it. Well, fortunately, the cost of demand charges on customers' bills are relatively low in the Midwest, and that's something that really, if it's higher, then a battery can make more sense, because you can output energy from that battery and you can offset that demand charge. And for anyone who doesn't know what a demand charge is, residential customers typically don't pay this. It's something that commercial, industrial, or in this case, NMU will have a demand charge that is literally the highest 15 minutes per month. It is usually how it works, but it's the highest 15 minutes per month will be the demand. So if you happen to turn on all of your AC at the same time, you're going to have a high demand charge that month. What a battery storage unit can do is it can instantly cut that down if it detects the energy jumping or spiking. And the more peaks and valleys that a demand charge has on an average day or month, the more a battery can make sense, because it can shave down those peaks and have a pretty significant financial impact. So that's why we have to get down to even 15-minute data on organizations to find out if their demand does this, or if it's just purely flat. But the more peaks and valleys, the more a battery makes sense. And specifically for NMU, and this was one that really piqued my interest, because in the Midwest, NMU pays a proportionally higher demand charge than most of the bills that I personally have looked at. So we usually have kind of a cutoff point of $15 per kilowatt. If it goes higher than that, it starts to pencil out. It starts to make sense to discuss energy storage. And I've got a rock star customer right now that is at $32 per kilowatt. Their payback is like 3 years. NMU has about $25 per kilowatt. It's high. And that's where batteries can actually come into place. And if you remember the slide that Dave had showed, the excess, if there is any excess from the university, which I suspect there's some during the day, but probably not a lot. But a battery storage unit can capture that excess rather than exporting to the grid. And in this case, we're not allowed to export to the grid with the current utility. So we can capture that and then export it back when needed. And because of the demand charging being so high, the battery can also be used to draw energy at night, and then to use that during the day to keep demand charges low. So there's many uses for battery storage, and NMU is one. As soon as I found out the demand charge, it opened up a lot of possibilities for what could happen and how to actually make it financially feasible. That's the biggest thing. We all want to do the right thing, but it has to be financially feasible. So I'll swing through these fairly quickly, but these are a few of the clients that we work with. We mainly, as a company, focus on mid to large size commercial, industrial, government, and then offsite solar when it's allowed. So we've done a lot of work for Target. This is Vomela Company's new headquarters. These are the largest size arrays that we're allowed to build in these utility territories. We've worked with the city of Edina. Extra Space Storage is actually a sustainability leader in the country. They have someone dedicated on their team just for solar and putting that on hundreds of their locations throughout the country. And they have their stats down and have found out that the investment is a very good one. This would be an offsite array. Within our territory in Minnesota, we're able to build these and have whether it's a residential address or a company or a school, subscribe to this. And they can actually save money by joining the community program that is called Community Solar. I had to include a couple of these just to show examples. So this is the Berry Event Center, and what can fit up there is about 550 kilowatts. Now, currently, with the way that Marquette Board and Light, the utility, works, is that we're not able to build something that big and export back to the grid. However, we don't think we need to. And that's something where we could put up a large array, most of the power. It's probably not going to cover all of the, in fact, it's not going to cover all of the usage of the event center, definitely not. But there could be some times during the day where maybe it does overproduce for a little bit, maybe on a weekend. That's something where the battery storage would be able to come in and have other uses to be able to offset. And then I did one more, the admin office, 340 kilowatts on this one. Overall, I actually modeled arrays for every available space on campus and rooftop, and found that we can get up to about 3 megawatts installed. And because the campus has something called a master meter, and every building, from my understanding, has sub meters. So you can install arrays at these buildings and have a large centralized battery storage unit that captures excess if there happens to be any. And then that can, instead of exporting to the grid, which is currently not allowed, can be used as backup at any other time. So that at least all of the energy being produced by solar is captured and used and saving the college money. So quick little bit on us. We've been around 30 years. We became the fastest growing company in Minnesota in 2017, and we're the top Midwest developer for solar right now. It's been a hectic few years for us. It's the past 6 years have really been where the majority of growth has come from. So we're learning fast and doing a lot to make sure that as we grow, we're growing smartly and sustainably. And then just what we focus on, mainly, middle to large size, public sector, commercial, and offsite.
Great. Thanks a lot, Ilan. That was excellent. So, you guys focused a lot on the rooftop arrays, and I understand that those can be cheaper sometimes, but that they have unique challenges, especially up here in the north. Dave, maybe since you have done an installation on a flat roof in Marquette, could you explain kind of, how that performs with the snow and what kind of considerations that has compared to maybe your ground mount systems?
Yeah, the installation there on Washington Street at Black Rock Brewery, they only went with a smaller one, but I did notice in looking at the production that it was snow covered for 60 to 75 days, but it has it caused me to look into how those 60 to 75 days might how you could actually eliminate snow without. And I've been in touch with a company that's out of St. Louis. I'm not sure, Ilan, if you're acquainted with it, but it's called Step Warm Floor or warm floor. And they have a heating element that could be installed across the across the solar panel and result in warming. It would actually use it's something I can share with you, but and those 60 to 75 days where you'd have snow cover on solar panels that would be on a roof could actually there's melting that can occur, and the snow can cascade off. But and we've had really good, of course, production at that Black Rocks Brewery from the roof solar that they've got. So it's going to be interesting to see what's possible, even on roof, and of course on ground mounted and single axis tracking, ones that follow the tracking. Solar is going to be a solution for almost all applications, and it's just going to be a question of engineering and the placement. And I think we're going to have good this new class of engineers that's coming along, and we're going to find solar is going to be used and usable right around almost all kinds of cases. So there's gonna be a lot of use. And if you look at snow melt examples, I could actually, not sure if I've got another case open, but I'll be able to share them with you, John, and we'll just, it's going to be application by application, case by case. It's going to be a very interesting future.
Okay, great. Yeah, and Ilan, did you want to comment on that too?
Yeah, we use NREL, or National Renewable Energy Laboratory. They use climate data and have a calculator that's pretty standard in the industry, and we use that to see specifically where we would put an array, what the historic climate data tells us about how much sun actually hits that area, and then it even includes snow as well, and we use that to model how many kilowatt hours per panel or per kilowatt will be produced. So it varies, but we assume that the panels are actually producing nothing while they're covered in snow. It comes off at some point, and we just let it happen. Some people ask if they can shovel it. We tell them don't put yourself in danger and go on an icy roof like that. Don't do that. But it varies widely. I mean, it just depends on when snow happens. This year, for example, in Minnesota, we've had a light snowfall, and we're producing already year to date about 40% higher than we did 2 years ago. Last year ended up actually being pretty close to the same as this year too. And then it finds a way to balance out pretty much over time to what the calculator says. So we just let the snow happen, assume we're not producing power, and when they're covered in snow. And if that's the case, that's just part of our calculation and cash flow that we create. Also, if the snow is higher than the panels themselves, the heating element won't do anything for you.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, and so that covers kind of the rooftop, and you mentioned how there's like a calculation where you're modeling the snow cover, and you're just assuming that, okay, that part of the year they're just not going to produce for a while, but because it's cheaper to put them up on the roof, and because we have the available space up on the roof, it's actually more economical to just forgo the energy production at that time. But there's a site on campus, and I've shared the screen here with you guys just to show. Essentially, we've got the Ripley heating plant down on the corner of Wright Street and Sugarloaf Avenue, and down by that roundabout. And that's where the master meter is for the main part of campus. So that's maybe 80% of NMU's power. So right nearby there, we've got 5 acres of land, and this about 3 acres maybe it's a nursery for trees that they were using, and the trees have since outgrown their transplantability, so those trees are not an asset anymore, and they've had a quote given to them, Northern has, on utilizing this space to put in a ground mount system of 600 kilowatts. Now, it's my understanding that 5 acres, you might be able to get a megawatt onto. They'd have to do some clearing of trees here. So, I know, Dave, you've got an interesting style of ground mount that doesn't require a concrete foundation. And then I'd like you to explain that, and then Ilan, if you can talk about what kind of options you guys have if a customer wanted to do a ground mount system, and what are the advantages in terms of snow and accessibility and that thing if you do have the space like this.
Well, at that kind of level, if you're thinking 600 kilowatts, and as Ilan notes, we often with ground mount, wherever you might have a higher tilt, 45 degrees. They say optimize ground mount at 10 degrees less than latitude in terms of the pitch. So if you're at 45, or you or 50 plus, latitude, you might be 40 in terms of the optimizing the annual production of power from the ground mount to the array. Down here where we're in the low 40s, we tend to optimize ground mount if it's going to be fixed position at 10 degrees less than latitude, so something in the low 30s.
Whereas the rooftop ones, those are only a 15
Wouldn't
degree.
matter. You're really looking for the clear open face to the south exposure, and you want to get that 180 degree daily transit. Try to optimize that. You don't gain a great deal if you can optimize on the 180 degree transit of the east to west of the uke and pick as much of that up as possible. Your north to south tilt is only going to influence 5% to a little bit more than that, 5 to 8% of the collection that's possible. We do look at that, and you have seen with larger systems, and you could evaluate the cost of what's called single axis tracking, depending on layouts where the posts are set north to south. And I've seen as many as 3 panels on rotate east in the morning and rolling with the sun until the sun sets at night, rolling east to west. John, have you been doing any SAT, single axis tracking installations?
Well, I've been interning and helping the Superior Solar project, and they're looking at a single axis tracker for their 150 megawatt system. So that's 1,000 times bigger. We're talking 1,500 acres for that. But I think, Ilan, you said at one point when we had a discussion earlier this year that it's getting economical at this point to do those single axis trackers. What do you guys offer in like a smaller, well, maybe like a megawatt scale or so?
Yeah, so if we're crossing the megawatt barrier, that's where it starts to make sense now to go with the single axis tracker. You can produce 15% more energy, and when you get to that specific size that's large enough, we're talking over the life of the system, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. So it really helps to capture every penny that you can, because you get many pennies. So with this site here, what is helpful with single axis tracking is to have a long row north to south for the tracker to work with. So this row has the site that you pulled together has more kind of east to west area. So as a quick example here, I can show just a really brief. Oh, I'm not allowed to share anymore.
Oh, here you go. Try it now.
Perfect. So I actually did pull together just a quick example of an array that fits in that area.
Okay.
This is not single axis tracker. This is just fixed tilt because it fit better in the area. Now this is not exact. It would have to be trimmed back a little bit based on where we put fences. But this gets us pretty close to a megawatt. And the reason why that's possible now is that panel technology and really just the density of how many kilowatts watts will fit on a panel. It just keeps getting better. So we're really in the golden age of the technology right now. So if I tell you a megawatt today, within 3 years, that might be a 1.3 megawatt. That's kind of how fast things are are moving. And actually, it might even be more than 1.3. So single axis tracking could work here, but it might be a little expensive because we have to buy custom parts to make that work. But if you had a nice long rectangle, you could put a lot of rows of the single axis trackers. Makes a lot of sense, and it makes a lot of power.
So you
Okay.
had about 5 acres there, John, and you would think that you could, in today's density, get more than 600 kilowatts there. That design engineering is key, but I'd like to think of, things in terms of a megawatt for 5 acres and still providing some access roads and access space.
Yeah, and so what about that? I've heard that comment from facilities that, if they've got to replace a roof, they're worried about the system being up there, or if there's a hole in the roof that they got to patch. I realize that these systems actually don't ever fasten through the roofing or be adhered to it even. They're just kind of weighted down. So that's an advantage, but still, if it's not like a brand new roof that just got put on, then at some point it'll have to be re-roofed, and so that'll be in the way. Versus, I guess on the flip side, if there's something wrong with the panels, to get up there, it might be easier if it's on ground level. So, what are there cost advantages with that, or how does that play in when you're deciding?
The biggest thing here is that the campus doesn't have an infinite amount of land. So it's either do you do it or do you not? The space that campus does have is rooftop. And I mean, it is economical. You can produce more power per panel on a ground mount just because it's tilted a bit more. But rooftop is typically cheaper to install. And so I'll give you an example. We work with some national clients, and we could get a portfolio of 10 to, I think our biggest one, which is a lot, it's like 150 buildings. Lifespans of rooftops come into play. So we're not going to be, let's just say it's 10 buildings. We're not going to put up 10 arrays that year, because each roof around the country for each different building will have a different age and a different amount of lifespan left on it. So there might be one building that year that we're able to put up an array on, and you create a 10 or 15 year plan that the goal is to get solar on every one of those rooftops. But the rooftops, you need to hit a point where it makes sense to replace that rooftop if it's close enough to its end of life, to replace the roof, put on the panels, so that they coincide and they work together. We don't want to put an array, which is really meant to be fairly permanent, 25 plus years. We don't want to put that on a roof that needs to be replaced in 10 years. That's problematic. So we try to time those, and you have to start and you have to create the strategy. So if there were a campus building that put up a roof, is going to this year or did last year, that's the first place you start.
Okay. Yeah. And, there is a building that is going to be put up, where major renovation done anyway. And I assume that the roof is going to be part of that, the Jacobetti complex. And Dave, and we've got a question about solar water heating in the chat. So if the Jacobetti complex were to install solar on the rooftop there, would you recommend solar water heating? I know that you've had experience with it.
It's my experience with solar water heating is not the current, so I really can't speak to it as a professional right now. We're only working with relatively simple residential installations, doing a few dozen of them, really about 15 years ago now. So I would have to pass on that one. I do think
that actually,
yeah.
Sorry, that actually lines up with us as well. We did them about 15 odd years ago, but we don't do them anymore. And when we did, it was mainly residential. I think we might have done one commercial. But I did a little bit that I did here was that it does work. Obviously, it heats up water, but it needs to be like a reasonable temperature out. And I just don't know enough. But what I have read is that it makes complete sense if you're in a place like San Diego, and if you're in northern U.S., it can make sense. But obviously, you have a portion of the year where it could be 0 degrees out, and it doesn't matter how much sun you're collecting, that water's probably still going to be fairly cold, if not ice, or at least risk turning to ice. So it's somewhere in between there is where it makes sense, when it makes sense in the country. But yeah, we don't do it anymore, so maybe that indicates why.
I remember that one of the companies that we trained at was a Florida location. And you do have to watch that tilt, because the tilt, whereas with solar, with PV, photovoltaic, you're going to optimize in a fixed position at 10 degrees flatter than latitude. With hot water, you tend to, particularly in this kind of climate, as you get toward the north, you go 10 degrees steeper than latitude, because you need hot water 12 months of the year, and you need that winter when the sun is low, you want to get more. So with the 10 degrees goes the other way in terms of fixed positioning.
Yeah, and so this kind of ties into last night's discussion around heating and cooling, and we were sort of getting at the electrify everything movement. They use the term strategic electrification or beneficial electrification, and I think in this case at Jacob Eddy, maybe if they were to install like a heat pump water heater, something electrically driven, and then you just use solar on the roof, solar panels, solar PV to run those machines. Ilan, is there a way that you're aware of? I know that, so you're talking about shaving down the peaks, so you've got kind of more of a steady demand all the time rather than these ups and downs using battery technology. But is there a way to utilize solar, like say you're overproducing or there's a time where you've got plenty of power, can you dump that into machines like water heaters at that time? Like, do you guys offer kind of a demand response system, or how can campus utilize something like that where you're using cheap energy, free energy productively, and then you don't have to invest maybe in as big of a battery system because you're shifting the load in that way. Do you guys offer a service like that?
So the way solar is installed is it's basically a mini power plant, and in most instances, not every, but in most, it's connected to the grid, so that it is, if the consumption is happening by the building or location where it is, it's being consumed. And if it's overproducing, then it's exported to the grid instantaneously. So the sine wave of the energy being produced is the same as the grid energy as well. So with that said, the actual electrons as they're being generated here are going throughout the entire building. So they're not directed at any particular machine. So it would come down to really, what I'm trying to say is this is difficult, but it's not impossible. It would come down to really good monitoring and a lot of monitoring, and some sort of automatic controls where if the CT were to, so current transformer, if that were to approach the point where it was going to the array was going to overproduce, I suppose if you had some automatic controls on hot water heaters or something that could just soak up the energy, those could then turn on. But that would be NMU facilities type of response. Is all right, here are some areas where we think we can use energy if we have to use it. That's a really good question. It's usually not something we look at, but we're also working with net metered arrays most of the time, which just means it doesn't matter where the energy goes, you're getting paid for those kilowatt hours. But if you can't export, then you have to get a little bit creative, and that's a great question. That would be an interesting way to take advantage of just soaking up that energy.
Yeah, and so I guess it's kind of on an economic question. So what about, I know, Dave, you've been able to help UP businesses take advantage of tax credits and grants. Are those kind of things available for Northern? They're maybe a tax exempt institution. What are our options there? And then maybe Ilan can pick up too.
Yep, not specifically. I mean, we enjoyed working with a couple of the farms, that are at the farmers market. There are seeds and spores. So got solar in for them and got a USDA REAP grant, Rural Energy for America program. We've really had great success over these last 5 to 10 years doing REAP grants for small rural businesses. So, but not.
Oh, Dave might have froze, or am I frozen?
No, we're good. I'm sorry.
I thought it was me too.
Well, maybe Ilan can pick it up from there.
Sure. So as
Not
Dave
available
was
in
talking,
tax credits, of course.
Dave's
There's
back.
going to be the utility involved with an institution like the university making these decisions. So if BLP can get with the university and figure things out together, you can do stuff. You think of what Green Mountain Power is done in Vermont, and you think of some of the stuff, the microgrids that are coming in Massachusetts. It really is going to take cooperation. It's going to take a village, so to speak. So NMU has to really sit down, and then you figure how it's going to be done. Smart controllers are coming in, and smart controllers engineering and electrical engineering and working at how you're going to be monitored and how that excess power gets used and when it gets used, and whether you do storage for peak management, because the utilities want to level out the use through the day. Also, they're going to want EVs to be charged when people are not aggressively running their washing machines and the load from the individual residences and stuff. So the balancing this stuff out it's going to take everybody figuring it out. And here come the EVs. We know they're going to be pushing.
Yeah.
So it might be bi-directional charging somewhere residential. You got a 70 kilowatt battery in that EV. And why would you invest in a 10 kilowatt house unit that's only going to handle some if bi-directional were possible, and you could use, if the grid went down, you could use the car. So lots is going to be happening.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought batteries back into the conversation, because Ilan, if you could touch on how the power purchase agreement works and how that allows for NMU to take advantage of the tax credits and how that can even bring battery storage into the picture.
Yeah, so power purchase agreements, or PPAs, are actually the most commonly used financing tool in the solar industry. So there are companies that are able to have dollars that they want to put towards capital equipment, and it might have a better payoff than solar. So that's where a company can come in, they can purchase the array for the organization and just sell the power back at a discount, depending on the size. So for NMU, because it's a nonprofit university, you don't get the tax credits. And right now it's 26%. It's actually expected to, well, not expected, it could go back up to 30%. There's a proposal in a committee in Congress right now that would put it back at 30% for 10 years, so that we can actually make a more substantial impact, and then have companies actually have a sight on the future. The hardest part for us is not knowing what's going to happen. So what someone can do then is these arrays that theoretically can work on campus, including the battery technology, can be purchased for the university. And if there's enough cooperation to be able to get the required information from the university, to want to at least see what a cash flow would look like with all of this combined. It's a complicated project. It's a very big project. But by looking at the demand charges, I'm willing to bet it's going to pencil out. And I'm willing to bet that the power at scale, if the full 3 megawatts or so could be put on campus with battery technology, I'd be willing to bet that we could sell that power back cheaper than what the campus is currently paying. And then all of a sudden there's a direct ability to address sustainability goals. So that's definitely where things are going. And as Dave mentioned, cooperation with the utility. Utilities there's something called a virtual power plant. I thought this was so cool when I heard about it. A combination of batteries. So in this case with the university, theoretically there could be an agreement where the utility had access to those batteries if they're big enough. And on days where it's very expensive for the utility to be creating or putting energy into the grid, they could request energy from these batteries. It's basically an on or standby power plant. And you can aggregate a lot of these together to create something that utilities might actually find really exciting.
Well, that sounds like a good direction for it all to move in, and I think you highlighted a really important possibility for Northern, that they don't have to even invest in this system, and Impact Power Solutions could be the owner of the solar and just sell it to Northern at a cheaper rate. It reduces NMU's carbon footprint. They have this image of solar panels for attracting students, and it seems like a win-win all the way around. And I see we're at time now, so I really want to thank you both for joining us, and everybody for joining in the conversation and participating. Tomorrow we'll be looking at the Scope 3 emissions, just one component of that, with a composting presentation and discussion. So I hope people can stay tuned in for that. The details are at nmu.edu/events.
Can you see that screen share there, John? I'm not sure.
Yeah, yep, thanks, Dave.
That's Whitman Hall for you to
Okay.
close out with.
How many megawatts or kilowatts?
No, just a couple of hundred kilowatts.
Okay.
That
All right.
microgrid is a term that's like virtual power plant, and but NMU needs to get with BLP and just start moving.
All right.
Then
Yep.
super briefly, John, one of the questions I think Susie had, we get this a lot, and I think it's important to address it. If solar technology keeps getting cheaper, why not just wait until it gets even cheaper? So I have a very, well, I don't know if I can. No, I can't share. I pulled up a stat, solar energy industry as well did this. The cost of solar per watt is dropping substantially. In fact, it dropped about, I think it was 85% or so in the last 10 years, but it's leveling out. So it's getting cheaper. The cost of the equipment is still getting cheaper, not as fast, but it is. However, we're now seeing increases in the soft costs, which would be labor. So the graph has It shows equipment costs kind of coming down steep, and now that even those are, not leveled, they're going down, but less quickly. As labor goes up, the average cost is almost flat this year versus last year. So we're at a point where as you have to pay attention just to the labor movement as well. Solar pays well as an industry anyways, but it'll continue to be competitive, and labor will cost more. So it's a great time to look at solar. And if you hold off, I don't think you're going to be getting a much better deal than today, unless something substantially changes with incentives.
So not only can they promote a green image, reduce their carbon footprint, and save money, but they can also put people to work doing this good stuff. All right. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks for having us. This was great.
Yes. Thank you, John. Good luck, NMU and Marquette.
Thank you. We learned a lot.
Great.